Dragon Ball is one of the animes that everyone has seen, unless you have been living under a rock. And in the different chapters, apart from the awesome characters and the power-ups, we were also able to see a variety of quite interesting objects that can be quite powerful. So today we are here to see which is the most powerful object in Dragon Ball. Now we will begin with an object that is actually a drink, and that is the ultra-sacred water, or better known as the water of the gods, is a magical liquid that Master Karim gives to those who manage to reach his tower and take the bottle out of his hands. It is assumed that whoever drinks this water instantly becomes stronger, greatly improving their statistics. So in the anime we see Goku battle enough to take the bottle from Karim, but finally he does it and drinks the water. But the cat explains to him that this does not have any type of magical power or that it is just ordinary water, which actually makes the people who come to him stronger. Looking for it is the training or the effort they make to get it, climbing the tower and also taking it from the cat. So practically this water has no effect since it is ordinary water. So for that reason we leave it as the weakest in this section. We continue with the insenji, which is a sacred fruit of Ding Yema that is found in hell. And this is similar to a peach that when consumed restores and doubles the energy and enhances the resistance, in addition to eliminating the need to sleep and eat for 3 months. We continue with the insenji, which is a sacred fruit of Ding Yema that is found in hell. And this is similar to a peach that when consumed restores and doubles the energy and enhances the resistance, in addition to eliminating the need to sleep and eat for 3 months. The benefits that this fruit provides are actually quite good. It is even mentioned that they are better than senzu beans. But the problem is that these can only be obtained in the hell, then accessing them can be a little difficult. In addition, the tree is also well guarded. It is very complicated to obtain. Without a doubt, it could be higher in the list. But for now we leave the fruit here because there are other objects with more interesting properties and are much easier to obtain. The fruit of the Tree of Might is seen in the movie DBZ The Tree of Might. In this movie, the army of turtles travels from planet to planet looking for the perfect place to plant the seeds of the tree so that this large red fruit sprouts. This has as characteristic that by consuming it, the consumer obtains a massive increase in energy and power, and as we see in the movie, he uses this fruit in his fight against Goku, which causes him to take the advantage. It is not made clear how much the power of the consumer increases, but it is mentioned that this could surpass Frieza in his first form. So if someone already has great base power, by consuming this fruit their power would increase exponentially, which would obviously help them a lot in combat. So, being a fruit that gives too much power to the consumer, we think it looks pretty good in this second place in this list. We came up with one of the best objects related to food in Dragon Ball, which obviously couldn't be other than the senzu beans. We've seen these throughout the entire Dragon Ball anime and manga, and they are a kind of magic beans grown by Master Karin in his tower. That is confirmed to be actually a tree that grows these beans and are used for a healing purpose. After eating them, the consumer will be instantly cured of any damage he has received, recovering all of their energy and being able to resist hunger for 10 days. In addition, the disadvantages are that they do not cure diseases, so curing a flu or cancer is impossible for them, since they are only limited to physical wounds or replenish energy, which is not that bad either. And the second would be that these can take a long time to harvest, which in many cases it means that the Z warriors do not have them available to heal themselves. In several moments they could have used some extra senzu beans, but they simply didn't have them because they only grow in Karin's tower, and Yajirobe is always eating them free of charge. So I think this item is quite useful, and that is why it remains the strongest. Also, it could have restored Gohan's future arm if he just ate one. So although these beans could even go to the first place, we leave it here because some other objects have properties that are more interesting. This an object that we began to see in that series from the saga of the Saiyajins, This is a kind of lens that is placed on the side of the head, and its main function is to detect or measure the amount of Ki of a person by pressing a button. It calculates the amount of Ki of the person that is in front of them, which serves more than anything to know who you are facing or how powerful your rival is. On the other hand, it was seen as a tracker that also has communication functions, and it can detect people's position from a faraway distance. Now we put it in this place since it can be replaced easily by the Ki detection that doesn't need any object, and is a characteristic that any living being can use to detect the enemy and its Ki level. But you need to train enough to be able to use it, so this object is useful for those who don't want to train for that ability, or for those who find it difficult. In addition, it also has too many flaws. It can explode if the power level increases fast enough, and the lack of precision it has compared to warriors who can sense Ki. This object becomes completely obsolete. After Frieza's saga, there are very few occasions in which we see it again, but is not relevant after that saga anymore, nor useful. Was seen in several chapters of Dragon Ball Z, and here we could say that it is a symbol or a uniform of the Saiyans, and also from Frieza's army. These are made of a fairly durable material, which allows them to withstand quite strong blows and very powerful energy attacks. In addition, the armor is quite elastic, allowing it to adapt to any type of body, even the Ozaru without breaking. Apart from this, they do not have any other characteristics, just protection. But it is the best protection in the galaxy, except for the arms. Let's go with the next one. Many may want to hang me for posting to the Dragon Radar in this position, since it is a fairly mythical object within the series, and the reason of why Dragon Ball is Dragon Ball. But we must accept that as it is, it does not present many advantages, apart from part of its main function, and it does not have such a power that the Dragon Radar benefits the user. As you should already know, it serves to track the locations of the Dragon Balls, indicating with a yellow light on the screen how far you are from the Dragon Balls. Basically, that would be the function that the radar has, which it has a very useful purpose. As said already, without it Dragon Ball wouldn't be Dragon Ball. So if we were talking about the most useful objects in Dragon Ball, this would be the very first place. But we will leave it here because at some point the series was not about the Dragon Balls anymore, and it was more about combats, leaving the balls in the background being useful just as a reset button for some occasions, with some exceptions of course. Now we go with Fortunateller. Baba's crystal ball is seen in several chapters of the series clearly when we see Baba, since she is always on top of this ball. This object has quite curious functions since it is capable of projecting the future and show the past, in addition to witnessing the present itself with the events that are happening at that moment. Thanks to this ball, it has been possible to locate people, places over battles in real time, and even find the location of the Dragon Balls. So this is a magical object with multiple tracking and prediction functions. Now what it is not made completely clear to us that whether this ball has its own powers or they are part of Baba's abilities, because from outside of this we do not see any more uses for this ball apart from the fact that it also serves as a means of transportation. This crystal ball in this position, because even if it is maybe the most useful artifact, given that it has the potential use of predicting incoming danger and see enemies without risking lives, it is used very little, and also is not clear if only Baba can use it, or if with the correct training anyone can use it. However, now we continue with the energy extractor, is an artifact seen in the Majin Buu saga, and this object, as its name says, extracts energy from people, storing it within it, and can even release it to make a fairly powerful shot according to the games. Although it is not 100% canon, extracting someone's energy could leave them weakened for a long period of time, and even if the complete energy is extracted, this could become a fatal death. The main use they give it in the series is for gather energy and release Majin Buu, so we cannot see it in its maximum splendor since it is not used for anything more than that. So it cannot advance further in the video since we cannot see what can really be done with this object. They are a fairly iconic object within the series. Who didn't imagine being inside one of these? When I was submerged in a pool or the sea of the beach, I pretended to be Vegeta or Goku healing to battle against my enemies once I was healed once again. We can see these capsules throughout several episodes of the Frieza's saga. And this would be a kind of chamber or container filled with a special liquid that can heal anyone who is inside. We generally see that these capsules are usually used by Frieza's army to heal and restore energy to his soldiers. I think it is a good method of action. Although it is not the most efficient that exists, since it usually takes some time to complete the entire process, depending obviously on the wounds of whoever is inside. So I think it is a useful object, but there are better ways to heal in this saga, such as the senzu beans. We go with the Hopoi capsules, which would be from the Capsule Corporation, which are also objects used quite a lot in the series. These are a type of capsules no larger than a battery, and their function is to store different devices so that in order to transport them comfortably, from a tiny food to entire buildings that have even furnitures and electricity. To remove the object it contains, you have to press the button at the top and throw the capsule to the ground, and after a moment the object will appear in the middle of a mini explosion and a cloud of smoke. What can be stored inside these capsules can become quite as showed in the series. You can go to a remote place like the most lonely planet in the universe and still transport your house and play Sparking Zero there with ease. And that is why I leave them here, for its usefulness in various cases. It was a gift that Master Roshi gave to Goku. The function that fulfills the flying Nimbus is merely for transportation, since it can load several people on top of it and carry them at a high speed. Although it is never made clear how fast it can go or how much it can carry, on some occasions we can see that it seems to have a kind of self-consciousness, since it can move independently or without someone controlling it. In addition to the fact that if it is called, it will quickly arrive at the location of the person who called it. One thing that must be taken into account about this object is that only people with a pure heart can use it, since otherwise they will fall to the ground when they try to ride it. Of course, everyone watching this video can ride it with ease, right? Let's stop the Nimbus from seeing your search history, just in case. However, I think this is a very good mobility object that earns this position, and I think it could also go up a couple more positions, but for other things like battle is not that useful. And taking in consideration that the characters can fly, it loses its job until there is another mini Goku who can inherit the Nimbus. These are seen for the first time in the Saiyajin saga, and these are presented by Nappa. They need a kind of jar which contains a few of these and a kind of growth or nutrition fluid, which allows these creatures to grow quite quickly and be born. It is quite simple, since you only have to plant a seed in the ground and then water them. It is also easy because Earth has the perfect ground to raise them in seconds. With all of these factors, in just seconds an army of Saibamen will have sprouted and will be at your service if you are stronger than them. They will obey you in anything and even sacrifice their own lives for you. Even Rick and Morty have their own version. Although these are uglier, but clearly the number of Siemens depends directly on how many seeds were planted, but obviously it can be quite useful if you have several seeds. Now the clear disadvantage is that these creatures are not stronger than Raditz, so someone minimally skilled at the Saiyan Saga standard could defeat them, unless they distract like the god Yamcha. Plus, they have to take the time to plant them, water them, and all that, so in a fight could even be impossible to get time to plant them. However, if you achieve to plant them in time, they could help you defeat an opponent that could be giving you problems. The attack balls are also a fairly iconic object for being one of the mobility vehicles that the Saiyans and several Frieza's soldiers used, and these capsules are like a kind of white sphere with a red crystal on the front that was used to send soldiers or anyone through space. The truth is that these are a good vehicle for cosmic transportation, since they can be used to transport anywhere, and anyone can get on them, since, despite not being very large, they are quite spacious and comfortable. These capsules are capable of traveling at the speed of light. In addition, those who travel inside are kept in a state of suspended animation that minimizes the resources necessary to survive. On the other hand, it can also be used for combat since they are quite resistant, allowing them to absorb the impact when reaching the landing location but nobody used them to land a direct blow in any enemy. By the way, usually generates several craters due to the tremendous speed. They also have a self-destruct function to be able to harm someone if they are stolen. And finally, their control is quite simple, since they can even be called remotely, so that it arrives where the user is. So as I said before, this vehicle or ship offers many advantages that make it one of the best mobility objects in all of Dragon Ball. Now we foe with the Z-Sword. That is an ancient, quite heavy weapon which was embedded at the top of the mountain of the sacred planet. And the legend says that whoever manages to remove it from the mountain will obtain surprising powers, and will become the most powerful warrior, as we see in the Majin Buu saga. Gohan manages to remove the sword from where it was embedded, and he also manages to master it in a very short time. Unfortunately, after trying to break a Kachin, the strongest metal that exists, it breaks, releasing the old Kai in the process, just like the ultra-sacred water that we saw before. The power that this object supposedly gives is more in the training you have when using the sword, since it is quite heavy. So when you get used to it, you get much more strength and speed. That's why we don't see this sword in its maximum splendor, which is an object specifically made for combat seen in Dragon Ball. This would be like a kind of robotic suit used by the elite of the army, controls the ribbon network, and grants the ability to fly, shoot laser beams, expel energy, and fire a fairly powerful missile that can generate a large explosion. It will also have a lot of force, which can mean delivering very powerful blows, and also resisting several attacks since it is quite large and robust. These armors can be quite useful for someone who is not so powerful within the Dragon Ball universe, for example an ordinary human, especially in the first seasons, which is when we see this armor, but against characters with excessive power like the ones we have in the most recent arcs, it would be almost useless to use them against them. Although, as I say, I think it is a good object for combat. The Bancho fan was a rather curious weapon. On the classic Dragon Ball, this was created from the feathers of the Kikui bird, and it has some quite peculiar characteristics. Master Roshi mentions that it has the ability to create a strong wind by fanning once. With 2 it would call a storm cloud, and with 3 it would cause a tremendous downpour. So this is a magical weapon that also, if used in melee, it can also cause a kind of climate change with strong winds, storms, and even rain. The problem here is that we did not see this object in its splendor, and that it did not appear much in the series. So no matter how interesting the abilities of this object are, we can't raise this one as much either. So I think that from what we saw, it's okay to leave it here. Which is undoubtedly Goku's signature weapon, and a fairly interesting one, because of the way it can be used from the beginning. In the series we see Goku with this object which, if you look closely, looks like a kind of stick, which he uses in several of his fights, and has the peculiarity that it can grow indefinitely or as much as Goku wants. To do this, you have to say the words, "The power pole grows," and it will lengthen immediately, being able to reach great heights in combat. It can be used to hit enemies that are quite far away, being a very useful weapon for short, medium, and long distances. You could also propel yourself with it to deliver blows much stronger with the momentum, and can even serve as mobility whether you want to escape or simply get somewhere by stretching it. It is a tool that, at least for me, you can get a lot of use out of if you know how to use it well. So that's why this earns this place. Now we continue with Tapian's ocarina. It is an object that we saw in the movie DBZ The Wrath of the Dragon. This small ocarina is a magical element that Tapian uses to keep Hildegard asleep, to stop him from causing disaster and end everything that is in their path. Now the function of this ocarina is quite simple, but that does not make it weak or useless, since through a series of notes, it manifests the user's Kai, allowing the user to mold it. To his liking, Tapian uses this to block Hildegard's attacks, using his Kai as a kind of barrier, which I find quite interesting. And although we did not see what else can be done with this manifestation, I feel that if the user can mold it as if he wants, it could also be used to attack by throwing powerful charges of Kai, although this would depend on the power of the person who plays it. Lastly, there is an advantage if you want to consider it as well, like the flying cloud, can only be used by beings with a pure and noble soul. Then people who are attracted to Wafus cannot use it unless they are subscribed to my channel. So for me this object has a very interesting use that if we had seen what else can be done with it, it would surely go up a couple more positions. Then we have the time machine, is a key element in some of the Dragon Ball sagas, such as the Cell Saga, where Trunks from the future uses it to warn Goku about all the things that happened in the future and try to heal his heart disease, even if he didn't listen and didn't take the medicine. His IQ's above average. It was created by Bulma after the appearance of androids in the alternative future. The function of this time machine is quite simple since you have to program the date on which you want to travel, whether past or future. And unlike other time machines that we have seen in another series and movies, this one doesn't change or alter the events of the present time, because everything you do ends up creating an alternate timeline. When Trunks travels to the past, his future does not have any type of change, but he did create a new one, which is the one we see in the anime and manga. So this one does not have the classic disadvantages that if you change something in the past your future can be destroyed now. Whatever you do, your future will be intact, so it will serve to prevent or change things to your liking, creating new timelines, which has its pros and cons. The disadvantage is that this time machine cannot make many trips, because each one consumes a large amount of energy, so it cannot be abused. It is difficult to qualify a machine with functions like this, but I think it is well positioned here. Let's continue with something similar but easier to carry. The Rings of Time are an accessory of the Kaioshin which allow you to travel in time or between different timelines. When using it, a kind of portal is created that allows you to travel to the past, the present, or the future, depending on the date selected. But for a short period of time, since once this time runs out, the ring will create another portal that will forcibly drag its wearer back to the time it is originally from. At least for me, this is a little more practical and a little more useful than the time machine, since it does not require energy to power to use it. But the disadvantage here is that you can only travel for a very short period of time, since it returns you to your time, and you also need to meet another small condition to be able to use it, which is to use a Patara. So this would complicate a little use of these rings. Although let me know below in the comments what you think, and what do you think is the best method to travel in time. Another thing is that I'm not sure if it can only be used by the Universe 10 Kais, because the Kai from our universe doesn't seem to have one of those. Maybe it's just because he got his position without the full Kai's training. Let's continue with the supercomputer. It is a creation of Dr. Jiro which was programmed to execute a master plan in order to finishing off Goku. She was responsible for the incubation of Cell for several years until its production ended. In addition, as we saw in the movie Dragon Ball Z, Super Android 13, she continued creating androids which reached great power. So although we don't see her too much and many times we overlook it, it has an enormous destructive potential since it can create androids or extremely powerful life forms, such as androids 14, 15 and 13 or Cell itself, which we could say is its greatest creation. Now we are going to check the Mafuba. That is not an object but a technique created by Mutato to defeat the Demon King Picoro and used multiple times in the series. This would be a powerful sealing technique where a kind of whirlpool is created around the target and sealed in a container close to it. For this reason we take it into consideration for the use of a container that can be anything, but it has to wear a seal to work. From what we have seen, the Mafuba is capable of enclosing any enemy, no matter how powerful it is, so this technique would be very effective in stopping someone quite strong, even the strongest being in the universe. Anyone that is causing problems once sealed cannot do anything at all unless someone frees them. The problem with this technique is that at the beginning it was deadly since whoever did it spent a lot of energy in performing the technique, costing them their life and requiring another person to place the seal in the container. So it was considered a technique of only one use and the last resort to defeat an invincible being. But later we saw that if you know how to manage the energy well, it can be done several times in a row. So for me, the Mafuba has a lot of potential, being a very good technique to contain someone who is really powerful who cannot be beaten in a fight hand in hand. Even Master Roshi used this technique several times in the Tournament of Power. We continue with the water mist, which is a gas-like substance that when released turns human beings on Earth into a kind of demons causing chaos everywhere. This spread of gas is due to the air, so it is very difficult to avoid getting infected. In addition, those infected by the gas can also infect others with bites, very similar to a zombie apocalypse. When a person inhales that gas, they have the opportunity to return to normal. If they are cured with the ultra-sacred water, that would be the way to counteract this fog. But if 24 hours pass, if the infected have not yet been cured, they will remain like this forever. Which, if you ask me, makes it a quite dangerous substance since it can cause the chaos where they are released, and in theory this can spread infinitely. So the destructive power it can have is quite great, and that is why I leave it here. It is seen in the OVA of Dragon Ball Z, the plan to eradicate the Saiyans, where we see that Dr. Reichai created this gas as part of his revenge thanks to the fact that the Saiyajin exterminated his race. That is, the Esabu race. His plan consisted of placing 4 of those machines around the entire Earth, which generated large quantities of this gas. Its characteristic is that it can gradually end the life of the Earth in addition to completely disabling the attack, leaving the Saiyans defenseless. As if that were not enough, thanks to Dr. Reichai, this gas was able to create a kind of copy of cooler, freezer, slack, internals, which protected the machines to prevent them from being destroyed. These copies seem to have a power similar to that of the originals, although in the end they were defeated. I also think that this gas has great potential, especially because of the power of remove the skills from the infected, since as we know the most powerful skills of these warriors require the use of energy. But at the end they are simple machines which can simply be destroyed. And besides this, it is not like they offer anything else, so for all this leave it here. Now we will see the big Geet star. We were able to see it in the movie, The Return of Cooler. And as we can see, this star, or whatever it is, because it doesn't look like a star at all, was originally a kind of chip that was in space which had the capacity to emit magnetic waves which served it to bind remains of metal and electronic devices little by little. This chip gathered so many remains that it acquired a large size and was able to build a kind of base with quite advanced technology inside it. After meeting Cooler, these two merged, rebuilding this last and giving it great power. In addition to what we see, this star can create or produce a large army of robots and can become as big as a planet depending on how much metal or devices it manages to absorb. In addition, this star can absorb the energy of the planet and destroy it completely, and even as Cooler mentioned, it can also absorb the energy of living beings. So we could describe this star as a kind of parasite that can have quite a lot of destructive power if it takes over a large amount of energy, although it can absorb so much power at the same time, and if it exceeds its limits it can explode, just as it happened in the movie. Otherwise, this star could have managed to take over more things. It would have been unstoppable with all the power it could accumulate, and that is why we leave it here. Is a viscous liquid similar to a slime which has quite interesting properties that we can see within Dragon Ball Super. The main characteristic or power that it has is absorbing entities and creating copies of any being. These copies that the slime creates have the same abilities or powers as the original person. And this for me puts it in a fairly high position since the potential of copying anyone makes it have the potential of creating the most powerful army in the story of anime. For example, in Dragon Ball Super, we see that this slime copies Vegeta, which gives Goku quite a fight. So if it manages to copy someone extremely powerful, it could become a very big problem as an extra, the original subjects that are copied. Due to this slime, they gradually lose their powers and their bodies disappear in the process of a few minutes after being absorbed, ending their lives. This issue of the disappearance of the original subject can be delayed if the victim puts a seal in the shape of a pacifier on the mouth, something that made Vegeta look funny. And if the copy is also eliminated, the original subject will be saved. Then I find the power that this object has quite interesting or curious, but it depends a lot on who absorbs this slime. Because if it absorbs someone weak, then is not going to be a threat at all. So let's see now the Tree of Might. It is a plant of divine essence that is planted on planet Earth during the Dragon Ball The Tree of Might movie. The function of this tree is to bear the fruit of might that greatly increases the power of the person who eats it. We already talked about the fruit of might, but this is higher in the position because it has a property that the fruit of might doesn't have, and that cannot be achieved by simple training of overcome one's self-limits, thing that can be done without the fruit of might. And it is because this tree can be considered a mass destruction weapon in planetary leave. Because the tree must absorb all the energy and life force of the planet, including the plants and living beings, on which it was planted through its roots. The planet on which the seed of this tree is planted has to have certain conditions for it to grow. In other words, it must be similar to planet Earth for it to develop correctly and make the fruit grow well. So we first have to apart from being used to be able to get the fruit that gives much more power. All of the inhabitants of the planet are in danger of dying thanks to this tree, because it absorbs almost all the vital strength of the planet in order to grow the fruit of might and give its consumer the power. So if it is not stopped in time, every single being living in the earth can be killed in the matter of hours. And as if that were not enough, it is also mentioned that this tree can be used to revive someone with its extract, since as we saw in the movie, Turtles used it to revive 2 members of an alien species that became extinct a long time ago. So I put this tree here because if it is used, it can exterminate a lot of creatures and living beings in record time, being even more dangerous than a nuclear bomb. There are magical earrings that have quite a lot of power, and as we already know, these earrings are used by the Kaishin that can give the wearer some interesting abilities. The main one and more notorious is that they have the ability to merge 2 people into a single entity, enhancing the power of both and being more effective than conventional fusion. Because there is no smart foe that would give the time to perform the steps to do the regular fusion dance. For this to be completed, 2 individuals have to put the earrings in the opposite ears, and these will be immediately attracted, forming the fusion and drastically increasing their power, merging them in one individual that has all the powers and knowledge of both and the current situation to act accordingly the moment, and don't waste any time in getting explanations or context to defeat the enemy. Unlike dancing, fusion with the Pataras, it is not necessary for both people to have a similar power since they will still be able to fuse, and the biggest problem with this fusion is that both subjects are going to remain together forever. Although in Dragon Ball Super is said that the fusion only lasts an hour if both of the participants are not a Kai. Although these earrings have a fairly simple function, it showed us that their fusions can be very powerful. So for those reasons I put them in this position. And because Vegito is one of the best characters in the anime, it is absolutely an object seen in Dragon Ball Super where Zenasama himself gives it to Goku so that he can call him at any time and can reach wherever Goku is, or if Goku prefers it, he can be teleported right where Goku is in that second. We have to accept that this object has a very simple use. But we put it here since it is an object with a very great destructive potential since, as we see, Goku himself uses it to summon Zenasama in his fight against Samas, so that he destroys the entire place completely in just an instant, including Zamasu, who had become the very existence in that universe, being completely undefeatable and indestructible. So it makes it a double-edged sword since you cannot control what Zenasama does. But if the user becomes his friend like Goku, he may listen to you with some questions or simply get angry and destroy everything like that. Do what you ask him to do or just play some Dragon Ball with him. I think it earns this position. although its power doesn't come with the button itself, but from Zenitama, that is the most powerful character in Dragon Ball existence. Then we see the time scrolls. These are a quite relevant object in the Dragon Ball Xenoverse games, and also Dragon Ball Heroes and a lot. This object is practically exclusive to the games, and we will talk about it since we found it quite interesting and also very powerful. These scrolls are basically the records of the multiple alternating lines. They are temporary changes that happen in the Dragon Ball universe. It implies that all the events of each saga are recorded in these scrolls. Among their main functions we have that they allow you to travel in time to the moments that are recorded, and unlike time machines, here no alternate lines or alternate universes that are created, converting these scrolls in a safe way to travel. Then we have that with these scrolls we can summon different people or variants of the timelines, which could serve as allies or cause a disaster if the wrong person is brought in. And finally, they are in this position because since they are records of the alternating lines, if they are erased they are damaged or directly destroyed. These can cause the period or the alternating line to be completely erased. We could compare it to the destruction of a universe, since everything that is there, it will disappear in an instant. So the person who has access to these scrolls has enough possibilities both to change their scrolls and to delete them permanently. And also, unlike the time travel by the time machine, these have actually the ability to change the past without any problem. And that is why they are left with this place in the video. Now I know that during the entire video we have not talked about literally the most powerful object in the series, that would be the Dragon Balls. So we decided to make a section at the end dedicated to these spheres to see which is the most powerful, arranging them from the weakest to the strongest. Let's start with the ones created by Manito. These, unlike the others we have seen in the anime, are only 2 spheres instead of 7. And they are also quite small, or the size of a marble. When put together, these invoke the Tarambo dragon, the dragon god of those spheres, which has the power to grant a wish to whoever invokes it. As far as its function is concerned, we know that it is very similar to what we already know, but the great difference is that there are only 2, so bringing them together is quite easy. Now the problem here is that this dragon has limited magic, so it couldn't grant quite complex wishes, although from what we saw it is quite wise and always looks for a way to fulfill what that has been asked. For just granting a wish and the limited magic of the Dragon Balls, I think it is a little behind the following spheres, but is very convenient that this dragon, despite being weak compared to the others, is very nice looking for a way to grant the wish. Because if the other dragons cannot grant the wish, then they just say that they cannot and ask you to think about another wish or get lost. Next in line we come up with the classic Dragon Balls that we can see throughout the anime. And as we already know, these are 7 magical spheres created by Kami-sama. When all these spheres are brought together, they are capable of summoning Shenlong, a gigantic dragon, which grants a wish to whoever invokes him, no matter the wish, as long as it doesn't go beyond his power. At the beginning, we see that these spheres have their limits, since it could not be revived so many people, or you couldn't ask for very extreme things, and as we see in the first times it is used, the wishes are not a big deal. Now when Dend creates them again after Kami-sama merged with Piccolo to defeat the androids, leaving his position as the god of Earth, losing the Dragon Balls, the number of wishes grows, with 3 being the ones that can be asked, and also it improves the power of Shenlong a little more. Although the reason they don't go higher in this section is because Shenlong still has some limitations in its desires. So you can't ask for just anything, like killing someone more powerful than him, or granting the same wish several times, or reviving someone who has been dead longer than a year. Unlike those on Earth, are larger, and these invoke Porunga, which is a quite powerful dragon. Porunga, like Shenlong, has certain limitations in the wishes he can grant, especially in those that involve harming or affecting someone in a certain way. But outside of that, their wishes are usually much more powerful, since, for example, this one is capable of reviving a large number of people with a single wish, among other things. But this one already granted from the beginning 3 wishes, being better than Shenlong. In addition to granting the wishes, the spheres do not disperse throughout the entire planet, but rather remain in the same place. Only they cannot be used for a period of time, so only due to the level of magic or power that Porongna has when granting his wishes, I decided to leave them in this position. Although let me know what you think. And like the ones on Earth, these were created by Kami-sama when this one was young. These have a similar appearance to those on Earth, only they are a little more red, and they have black spheres, and when used they invoke the definitive Shenlong. Although it can only grant 1 wish at a time, it is much more powerful since can grant any wish without any limitation, like someone's death, something that Shenlong cannot do. So unlimited power in the wishes he can grant is one of the most broken things that exist within this universe, but they have a very bad disadvantage, and is that it is also a massive destruction weapon whether the user likes it or not. Because the planet where the Dragon Balls are used is now condemned to destruction. These balls also have no reset limit, but they are dispersed through all the universe. And unless another wish is granted in another planet, the planet where they were last used is going to explode. So if you want to use them, I recommend you to use them in a remote planet where nobody lives, or else you are killing an entire race just for your lowly desire. Now we go away from that destruction to get to safer Dragon Balls. These are the Super Dragon Ball S which we saw in Dragon Ball Super. We could say that so far they are the most powerful that we have seen in the franchise. These, from what we know, they were created by Salama, and are among the universes 6 and 7. In addition to the fact that they have the characteristic that they are the size of an entire planet, being the largest balls that we have seen, when gathering the spheres that are also 7, the user will be able to invoke Super Shenlong, which is considered the god of dragons. Its power means that desires do not have any type of limit, being able to request what the user wants without any restriction, which already gives them the title of being the most efficient. Now the disadvantage here is that after fulfilling the wish, these spheres will disperse again between both universes, making them very difficult to find. In addition to the fact that they cannot be used for a year, but don't have the disadvantages of destroying an entire planet or having to think a way to accomplish the wish, because these balls can do absolutely anything you want. That is still something that we don't know entirely, because they can have more power than Zeno-sama or not. But well, for the rest, we consider them to be the most powerful of all, and that is why they earned the first place in this video.